Their music inspired a generation. Their breakup stunned the world.
Immediately, the shockwaves were felt around the world. Fans were distraught because the Beatles were fighting. How could this be?
Their feud destroyed pop's most prolific partnership. Now the VH1 original movie Two of Us wonders what if? What if John and Paul met 6 years after the breakup?
If you've come here to reunite the Beatles, you can turn right back around.
Oh, hang on.
The John Lennon and Paul McCartney story begins July 6, 1957 in Liverpool, England. 16-year-old Lennon plays a Liverpool church party with his fledgling group, the Quarrymen. A friend introduces him to 15-year-old aspiring guitarist Paul McCartney. An instant bond and rivalry develops.
A fascinating dynamic is set up the day that John and Paul meet. Initially, Paul is mesmerized by John's performing ability on stage, but then John is impressed with Paul's ability to play guitar and to remember all the lyrics of these rock and roll songs. So they become musical blood brothers at that moment.
McCartney joined Lennon's group, and a unique partnership grew between the two young artists.
They discover that they both have a passion for American rock and roll, so they start writing together. In a sense, it's like you meet somebody and you fall in love.
By 1962, the band eventually settled on a name, the Beatles, and its final lineup, John, Paul, George, and Ringo. A year later, the Beatles' first big hit, Please Please Me, soared to #2 on the UK charts. And then, on February 7th, 1964, just 6 days after their first U.S. release, I Want to Hold Your Hand landed at the top spot in the Hot 100. The Beatles touched down at New York's JFK Airport.
The pandemonium created by the 3,000 teenagers on hand to greet the sortie of Britain's bristling Beatles is something one might expect from a collision of planets.
Beatlemania was born. The chaos surrounding Beatlemania brought the whole band closer together, but it was John and Paul who forged the tightest bond.
The four guys were always friendly with each other, but John and Paul had the closest relationship because they collaborated.
As the Lennon-McCartney team continued to pump out hit after hit, the band played on to delirious, sellout crowds. But by 1966, the screaming fans began to overwhelm the band. The Fab Four couldn't even hear themselves play.
There was nothing compared to Beatle fans in full frenzy. The Beatles literally created hysteria.
The group voted to stop touring and devote themselves to growing musically in the studio.
When the Beatles stopped touring in 1966, the media was saying, oh, it's over, they're breaking up. Meanwhile, the Beatles were in the studio making Sgt. Pepper.
Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was widely regarded as a masterpiece, the most innovative pop album ever made. But the giddy excitement surrounding Sgt. Pepper's would prove short-lived. August 1967, just 2 months after Sgt. Pepper's release, Beatles' longtime manager and mentor, Brian Epstein, died of an apparent drug overdose.
He kept them together. He was the adhesive. He had the magic to keep their magic together. And when he died, it broke. It ended.
The band struggled on, with McCartney stepping in to take control.
Inevitably, there was a kind of resentment from the other guys that Paul was bossing them around.
That summer, as the group recorded their famous White Album, tensions increased. The others resented John regularly bringing Yoko into the studio. Ringo and George grew frustrated with their lack of material on the album. By the start of 1969, the Beatles had released 16 #1 hits, but Paul and John were celebrating for other reasons. Paul married photographer Linda Eastman on March 12th. And less than 10 days later, John married Yoko in Gibraltar. John and Paul were going their separate ways. Creatively, they were consulting more than collaborating.
As different as their relationships were, when it came to how they wanted to be with the woman in their life, John and Paul were startlingly similar. They both wanted their woman to be with them at all times.
When McCartney released his own solo album almost simultaneously with the Beatles' Let It Be, it became clear to fans just how deep the rift between John and Paul had become. But even the band themselves were shocked when Paul issued a press release announcing he'd quit. The Beatles were over. John and Paul's friendship disintegrated into public displays of hostility. In McCartney's Too Many People from his 1971 album Ram, he wrote, "You broke it in two too many people sharing party lines, a thinly veiled jab at John and Yoko about their role in the breakup. Ram's back cover had a more direct approach.
His message was, you are screwing another Beatle. Beatle is screwing a Beatle. This was a very potent message.
John returned fire that same year with his own message. He mocked McCartney's Ram cover by holding the head of a pig in this photograph. And in How Do You Sleep, a song included on Lennon's Imagine album, he attacked Paul with, a pretty face may last a year or two, but pretty soon they'll see what you can do.
It was very, very sad, really, because these two people had created the music that changed the world, and now they were just fighting each other, just like regular folks.
Despite the Beatles insisting no, heartbroken fans begged for a reunion.
Ringo once had a remark in the 1970s saying, "The madness goes on without us. We don't have to even ever make another record. They are always assuming, always asking us, when are you going to get back together?"
Hi, I'm Lorne Michaels, the producer of Saturday Night. Right now we're being seen
The
by...
demand for a reunion was so intense that in 1976, Saturday Night Live executive producer Lorne Michaels offered the Beatles $3,000 to appear together on his show. The $3,000 figure was an obvious joke. Of course, the Beatles never played together again. John's assassination in 1980 made that impossible.
This is WNEW-FM in New York. I have the extremely sad task of informing you that John Lennon died tonight. And I am at a loss for words. I think for the first time in my career on the radio, I don't have anything to say.
But for a moment in the VH1 original movie Two of Us, there is hope.
Let's do it.
Hope. And the burning question, what if?